The following is a DW Ancient Babylon production. In our last episode, we discussed the rise and fall of the Akkadian Empire and the Ur III Dynasty, the Neo-Sumerian Empire. We left off with the Elamites being driven out of Ur by the Amorites, who had formed successor states to the Ur III Dynasty. We begin this episode with the Old Babylonian Period, the 8 Kingdoms, and the rise and fall of the Babylonian Empire under Hammurabi. The topics of this episode include Shamshi-Adad and the Kingdom of Upper Mesopotamia, the kingdoms of Isin and Larsa, Babylon and King Hammurabi, and the Code of Hammurabi. After the Ur III Dynasty, Mesopotamia returned to multiple city-states, with nearly each city ruled by a separate king. These rulers, all military men, vied for power and joined in ever-shifting alliances that often turned against each other. A passage from the letter excavated at Mari sums up the political situation. There is no king who is strong on his own. Hammurabi of Babylon has a following of 10 or 15 kings. Remsen of Larsa the same. Abal-Pael of Eshnunna the same, Amut-Pael of Katna the same, and Yeramlim of Yamhad has a following of 20 kings. A handful of powerful rulers from southern Babylonia to western Syria had carved up the Near East by forcing smaller kings to be their vassals. 8 kingdoms emerged at about the same time to include Yamhad, Katna, Ekalatum and Mari, Eshnunna, Babylon, Isin, Larsa, and Elam. Little information about these kingdoms is known, however, due to the lack of archaeological records available. Most of these sites rest under debris and ruins from all the subsequent periods and is not currently available to archaeologists. The kingdoms of Eshnunna, Elam, Yamhad, and Katna can only be pieced together in the barest outlines because of our lack of chronological data on the lengths of reigns and sequence of kings. We'll discuss what we do know and highlight key players who influenced the political history of specific kingdoms. The early history of King Shamshi-Adad is vague to us. We cannot even establish when and where he first ascended any particular Mesopotamian throne. Most likely, around 1833 BC, he inherited rule from his father, Elah-Kabkabu in Ekalatum, a city unlocated, but certainly in the vicinity of Ashur. There he governed about 10 years until he had to flee to Babylon, where Naram-Sin of Eshnunna conquered Ekalatum. This is not the same Naram-Sin of Akkad as discussed in the last episode, but a different ruler who took his name. When Naram-Sin died 7 years later, Shamshi-Adad took the opportunity to return from exile, and 3 years later conquered Ashur as well. At that time, he was still only the ruler of a minor power in the region. Soon, however, he extended his influence westward into northern Syria, where he clashed with Yadam-Lim of Mari. The mighty kingdom of Mari controlled the caravan route between Anatolia and Mesopotamia. King Yadam-Lim was assassinated by his own servants, possibly on Shamshi-Adad's orders, and the heir to the throne, Zemri-Lim, was forced to flee to Yamhad. Shamshi-Adad seized the opportunity and occupied Mari in roughly 1795 BC, thus creating the Kingdom of Upper Mesopotamia. Shamshi-Adad was a very tolerant ruler. At Ashur, also known as Assur, he took the title Governor of Ashur, and in Nineveh he restored the Ishtar temple, said to have been built by Manishtushu 5 centuries before. Certain cities, such as Katara, retained their former rulers, who now became his vassals. Having to control this large kingdom, Shamshi-Adad, who resided in Shubat-Enlil, placed his 2 sons in strategic locations. The eldest, Ishmi-Dagan, ascended the throne at Ekalatum, the ancestral home, while his younger, Yasma-Adad, was placed in Mari. Ishmi-Dagan clearly had more authority than his younger brother and often scolded Yasma-Adad for his inaction. The father kept ultimate authority, however, sending numerous letters to his sons. Those to Mari accused Yasma-Adad of being lazy. He stated repeatedly, "How long do we have to guide you in every matter? Are you a child and not an adult? Don't you see that your brother is leading vast armies? So you too, take charge of your palace, your house." Shamshi-Adad clearly kept a firm control on the actions of his sons. At one point, he arranged a diplomatic marriage between Yasma-Adad and Beltum, the princess of his ally in Katna. Yasma-Adad already had a leading wife and placed this princess in a secondary position of power. Shamshi-Adad did not approve and forced his son to keep Beltum in the palace in a leading position. Shamshi-Adad continued to strengthen his kingdom throughout his life, but as he became older, the state became more vulnerable and the neighboring powers of Yamhad and Ashnuna began attacking. When he died, either in battle or of natural causes in 1776 BC, local powers quickly asserted themselves. Zimri-Lin returned from exile and chased Yasma-Adad from Mari. Ishmi-Dagan lost control of everything except Ekalatam and Ashur. Northern Syria became a patchwork of small independent states. Hammurabi, one of the most famous kings of Mesopotamian history, would soon confront both Ishmi-Dagan and Zimri-Lin on the battlefield. The end of Ur's rule over Sumer and Akkad did not lead to an immediate fragmentation of political power. Early in the reign of Isin, the last king of Ur, Ishbi-Era, a general under his authority, had established a dynasty in Isin and took over control of much of the region. When Ur was captured by the Elamites, it was Ishbi-Era who freed the city, and his successors usurped the title King of Ur after capturing Uruk and Lagash, which Larsa was subject to. Subsequent Isin rulers appointed governors to rule over the cities. One such governor, Gunganum, broke with Isin and established an independent dynasty at Larsa. To legitimize his claim to the throne and to deliver a blow to Isin, he captured the city of Ur. He and his successors then took steps to block trade routes to diminish Isin's supremacy. Larsa's political peak occurred under the reign of Remsen, who would rule for 60 years, making him the longest reigning king in Mesopotamian history. Upon acquiring the throne from his brother Waredsin, Remsen immediately expanded Larsa by attacking the neighboring city-states of Uruk, Isin, and Babylon, capturing some villages near Uruk. He would go on to eventually take Uruk in roughly 1800 BC and then Isin in 1793 BC, making Babylon the only rival state in Babylonia. Remsen spent the next 30 years consolidating his grasp over the south by concentrating on administrative functions in the capital and reducing the economic independence of the earlier city-states. Hammurabi, now king of Babylon, waited until Remsen was an old man to initiate his swift conquest of all his neighbors, including Larsa, which he conquered in 1763 BC. After a 6-month siege, Remsen escaped the city, but was soon found and taken prisoner where he died thereafter. Hammurabi left Remsen's organization in place, however, continuing to rely on men from Larsa to supervise the administration of southern Babylonia. Remsen thus laid the groundwork for Hammurabi's centralized state. The kings who came before Hammurabi had ruled a relatively minor city-state that was created in about 1894 BC. Their kingdom controlled little territory outside the city itself. These kings managed to gradually create a state incorporating previously independent city-states such as Sippor, Kish, Dilbit, and Marad. Babylonia was hemmed in by the more prominent states of Eshnuna, Larsa, and the kingdom of Upper Mesopotamia. When Hammurabi became king in 1792 BC, Remsen had just unified the entirety of southern Babylonia, while Shamshi-Adad reigned supreme in the north. Hammurabi may at first have even owed allegiance to Shamshi-Adad, but Hammurabi would usher in the Old Babylonian Period, the beginning of Babylon's political dominance over southern Mesopotamia for the next 1,500 years. The first few decades of Hammurabi's reign were quite peaceful. He used his power to dig canals, expand temples, and fortify cities. When he decided to act militarily, his actions would be short but devastating, while using his considerable diplomatic skills. In 1801 BC, the powerful kingdom of Elam attacked and destroyed the kingdom of Eshnunna, destroying a number of cities and imposing its rule on portions of the Fertile Plain for the first time. In order to consolidate its position, Elam tried to start a war between Babylon and Larsa. Hammurabi and Remsen discovered this manipulation and made an alliance with each other to attack Elam. They were able to successfully crush the Elamites, although Larsa did not contribute greatly to the military effort. Angered by Remsen's failure to come to his aid, Hammurabi turned on his ally and gained control of the lower Mesopotamian plain. As Hammurabi was assisted during the war in the south by his allies from the north, such as Yamhad and Mari, the absence of soldiers in the north led to unrest. As a result, he turned to the north and defeated Eshnunna and Mari in quick succession. Eshnunna he left without a leader, while he blocked Elam's ability to exercise any influence over Mesopotamia, where he campaigned twice in later years without fully controlling the region. There is no doubt, however, that he was the strongest king in Mesopotamia. After these events, he could proclaim himself the king who made the 4 quarters of the earth obedient. The Code of Hammurabi was not the earliest surviving law code. It was predated by the Code of Ur III, as mentioned earlier, but it was one of the first law codes to place restrictions on what a wronged person was allowed to do in retribution. Earlier Sumerian law codes focused on compensating the victim of a crime, but the Code of Hammurabi instead focused on physically punishing the perpetrator. This code was inscribed on a stele and placed in a public place so that all could see it, although it was thought that few were literate. The stele was later plundered by the Elamites and removed to their capital, Susa. It was rediscovered there in 1901 in Iran and is now in the Louvre Museum in Paris. The 2-meter-high black diorite stele contains about 300 statements, all structured on the same pattern, if, then. For example, if a man creates a robbery in his cot, that man will be killed. While dealing with many areas of life, the entries do not by far cover all possible crimes, and there are even some contradictions. Moreover, the many legal documents of the period, including records of law cases, never make reference to the code. The function of the law code itself has been debated, but consensus is growing that the modern designation of it is wrong. It is not a code of law, but a monument presenting Hammurabi as an exemplary king of justice. He says himself, "May any wronged man who has a case come before my statue as king of justice, and may he have my inscribed stele read aloud to him. May he examine his lawsuit, and may he calm his troubled heart. May he say, Hammurabi provided just ways for the land." During the reign of Hammurabi, Babylon usurped the position of the most holy city in southern Mesopotamia from the city-state Nippur. By the end of his reign, Hammurabi had fundamentally altered the political layout of Mesopotamia. Babylonia was the single great power, surrounded by weak remnants of formerly great rivals, Elam, Eshnunna, and Ashur. Only in western Syria were states such as Yamhad unaffected by his actions. His unification was short-lived, however. Only 10 years after his death, his son, Shamshi-Adad, faced a major rebellion and the empire began to collapse. Hammurabi's ineffectual successors eventually met with further defeats, and loss of territory at the hands of the Assyrians, until the kingdom was reduced to the small and minor state it had once been upon its founding. Stability would return, and Babylon would be ruled by kings for the next 155 years until the rise of the Hittite Empire. They would sack the city in 1595 BC and turn over Babylon to their Kassite allies, a people from the Zagros Mountains. We follow the rise and fall of the Hittite Empire in the next episode. Thank you for joining us.